The red carpet stretched like a river of crimson velvet outside Grauman's Chinese Theater in Hollywood. Flashbulbs popped like fireworks as limousines pulled up one after another, delivering America's biggest stars to the premiere of The Searchers. It was May 1956, and John Wayne stood at the height of his fame, wearing his signature cowboy hat and a tailored suit that cost more than most families earned in a month. But something caught his eye that made him stop mid-stride. Something that would change everything. In the shadows beyond the velvet ropes, pushed against the cold stone wall of the theater, sat a young man in a wheelchair. He couldn't have been more than 19 years old. While photographers shouted for Wayne's attention and fans screamed his name, the Duke's gaze locked onto that wheelchair. The young man's face showed a mixture of hope and resignation, as if he'd learned long ago that heroes only existed on movie screens. Before we continue with what John Wayne did next, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. This story of compassion will remind you why some legends never die. Now, let's see what happened when Hollywood's toughest cowboy showed his true character. What John Wayne did in the next 60 seconds would prove that real heroism has nothing to do with the roles you play, and everything to do with the person you are when the cameras aren't watching. The young man's story. His name was Michael Patterson, and 6 months earlier, he'd been a star quarterback at Los Angeles High School with a full scholarship to USC waiting for him. Life had been perfect until one rainy November night when a drunk driver ran a red light on Sunset Boulevard. The crash killed Michael's girlfriend instantly and left him paralyzed from the waist down. The doctors at Cedars-Sinai had been blunt. "You'll never walk again, son. The sooner you accept that, the better." His football scholarship vanished overnight. His friends stopped visiting. Even his own father struggled to look at him, seeing only broken dreams instead of his son. Michael's mother, Dorothy Patterson, worked 3 jobs to pay the medical bills that insurance wouldn't cover. She cleaned offices at night, waited tables during lunch, and took in laundry on weekends. But she never missed a chance to bring Michael small joys. Tonight, she'd spent her last $20 on a taxi to bring him to this premiere. "You've always loved John Wayne movies," she'd said that morning, her eyes tired but hopeful. "Maybe seeing your hero will remind you that life still has good things in it." Michael hadn't wanted to come. He was tired of pitying stares, tired of being invisible, tired of feeling like half a person. But he couldn't say no to his mother, not after everything she'd sacrificed. So here he sat, pushed against the wall where he wouldn't block anyone's view, watching stars parade past like they lived in a different world. The world of 1950s Hollywood. In 1956, people with disabilities were largely hidden from public view. There were no wheelchair ramps, no accessibility laws, no representation in movies or television. Society viewed physical limitations as something shameful, something to be kept behind closed doors. Even movie theaters often refused entry to wheelchair users, claiming they were fire hazards. John Wayne himself had become America's symbol of strength and masculinity. His movies showed him as an unstoppable force, a man who conquered every frontier and defeated every enemy. He represented everything that society valued: physical power, independence, and rugged individualism. But the real John Wayne, born Marion Morrison in Iowa, understood struggle in ways his fans never knew. He'd grown up poor during the Depression, worked brutal hours as a prop boy at Fox Studios, and clawed his way to stardom through sheer determination. His father had been distant and critical, never satisfied with anything young Marion accomplished. That childhood had taught him to notice the people society overlooked. The premiere event, The Searchers, was expected to be the biggest Western of the decade. Director John Ford had poured his heart into the film, and early reviews suggested it might be Wayne's finest performance. The studio had spared no expense on this premiere, with searchlights sweeping the night sky and a full orchestra playing inside the theater. Studio executives hovered nervously, checking their watches. The film would start in exactly 15 minutes. Every second of delay meant potential complications with the carefully orchestrated schedule. Press photographers had been positioned at specific angles to capture the stars entering the theater. Radio broadcasters were doing live reports. Everything had been planned down to the smallest detail. Everything except what John Wayne was about to do. The moment of recognition. Wayne's publicist, a nervous young man named Harold, tugged at the Duke's sleeve. "Mr. Wayne, we need to get you inside. The radio interview is scheduled for 7:30 sharp." But Wayne wasn't listening. He was staring at Michael Patterson with an intensity that made the young man shrink back against his wheelchair. For a terrible moment, Michael thought the famous actor was angry about his presence, that he'd somehow violated an unspoken rule by daring to come here. Then Wayne did something unexpected. He removed his cowboy hat, a gesture of respect he usually reserved for ladies and fellow veterans, and started walking toward Michael. Not the casual stroll of a star acknowledging a fan, but a purposeful stride that parted the crowd like Moses splitting the Red Sea. The red carpet photographers noticed immediately. Cameras swiveled away from the arriving starlets. This was different. This was news. "Son," Wayne said when he reached Michael, his voice that familiar gravelly drawl that had narrated 1,000 Western adventures. "What's your name?" Michael's throat closed up. Up close, John Wayne was even more imposing than he appeared on screen, 6'4" of solid presence. But his eyes, those famous eyes that could look fierce or tender depending on the scene, held nothing but genuine interest. "And Michael, sir. Michael Patterson." Wayne extended his hand, not down in a condescending way, but straight out man to man. His grip was firm, respectful. "Pleased to meet you, Michael. I'm John Wayne, but you can call me Duke if you like. That's what my friends call me." The barriers appear. Harold the publicist appeared at Wayne's elbow, practically vibrating with anxiety. "Mr. Wayne, please. The schedule. Mr. Ford is waiting inside, and the studio chiefs are getting impatient." Behind Harold, a theater manager in a crisp suit joined the conversation, his tone apologetic but firm. "Mr. Wayne, I'm terribly sorry, but our theater isn't equipped for this situation. We don't have the proper facilities. It's a liability issue, you understand. Insurance regulations. Translation: wheelchairs weren't welcome." Michael had heard variations of this speech at restaurants, department stores, and even churches. He started backing his wheelchair away, familiar shame burning his cheeks. "It's okay, Mr. Wayne. I shouldn't have come. I'll just go." Dorothy Patterson, who'd been standing quietly nearby, put her hand on her son's shoulder. Her worn coat and tired face told the story of her struggles, but her dignity remained intact. "Come on, Michael. We'll listen to it on the radio at home." That's when Wayne's famous jaw set in that stubborn line that every Western fan recognized. It was the look he got right before he told the villain that this town wasn't big enough for both of them. Except this time, the villain wasn't a gunslinger. It was prejudice, wrapped in the polite language of policy and procedure. The line in the sand. "Now hold on just a minute," Wayne said, his voice carrying that authoritative tone that made audiences believe he really was a marshal or a cavalry colonel. He turned to the theater manager with eyes that had gone cold as prairie wind. "Are you telling me that this young man can't watch a movie in your theater?" The manager shifted uncomfortably. Around them, the crowd had gone silent. This was better than any movie. "It's not personal, Mr. Wayne. It's simply that we're not equipped for wheelchairs. The aisles are too narrow and fire codes require." "Fire codes," Wayne interrupted, his voice rising just enough to carry weight without becoming aggressive. "Let me tell you something about fire codes and regulations. This young man served his country just by being an American citizen. He's got every bit as much right to be here as any of these folks in fancy dresses and expensive suits." He gestured at the crowd of stars and socialites, many of whom were now paying rapt attention. "You know what I see when I look at Michael? I see courage. I see dignity. I see someone who got knocked down by life and kept on going. That's more heroic than anything I've ever done on a movie screen." Harold tried again, his voice nearly pleading. "Mr. Wayne, the studio executives are inside. This is your movie. You're the star. They need you for the introduction." Wayne looked at Harold, then at the theater manager, then back at Michael. His mind was clearly working through something, calculating odds the way his characters did before a big showdown. The crowd waited, breath held, wondering what the Duke would do. The personal connection. Wayne knelt down beside Michael's wheelchair, an action that sent photographers into a frenzy of clicking shutters. At eye level now, the famous actor's face was softer, more vulnerable than it ever appeared on screen. "Michael, can I ask you something? What happened to you?" "Car accident, sir. 6 months ago." "You in pain?" "Sometimes. But that's not the worst part." Michael's voice caught. "The worst part is feeling invisible. Like I stopped being a person and became just this." He gestured at his wheelchair. Wayne nodded slowly. "I'm going to tell you something I've never said in public before. My father never thought I'd amount to anything. Called me soft, called me weak. Said I'd never be man enough to make it in this world. You know what I learned from that?" Michael shook his head, transfixed. "I learned that other people's limitations aren't yours. They see what they want to see, what they're comfortable seeing. But that doesn't make it true. He stood up, placing his hand on Michael's shoulder. You being in that wheelchair doesn't make you less of a man. It makes you someone who survived something that would have killed a weaker person. Dorothy Patterson wiped tears from her eyes. Around them, the crowd of glamorous people in expensive clothes stood transfixed by this moment of raw humanity. The impossible choice. The theater manager, sensing he was losing control of the situation, played his final card. Mr. Wayne, I understand your feelings, but I have my orders from the theater ownership. No wheelchairs in the main auditorium. If you insist on bringing this young man inside, I'll have to call the police for trespassing. It was a bluff and everyone knew it. No theater manager would dare have John Wayne arrested. But it put the star in an impossible position. He could either leave Michael outside, disappointing the young man but keeping peace with the studio and theater, or he could push this confrontation to a point where lawyers and police got involved, potentially ruining the premiere of his most important film. The studio publicist jumped in, trying to find middle ground. Perhaps we could arrange a private screening for the young man later? Next week, when the theater is less crowded? Wayne's eyes narrowed. So, separate but equal? Is that what you're suggesting, Harold? The reference wasn't lost on anyone. This was 1956, just 2 years after Brown versus Board of Education. The civil rights movement was heating up across the country. Wayne, known for his conservative politics, had just drawn a parallel between disability discrimination and racial segregation. Harold blanched. I didn't mean. I know what you meant, Wayne said. And the answer is no. Michael doesn't get a separate screening. He gets to watch this movie tonight with everyone else, or I don't go in either. The crowd gasped. The studio executives would have heart attacks. This was John Wayne's movie, his premiere, possibly his finest performance. And he was willing to walk away from it. You can't be serious, the theater manager said. Wayne put his cowboy hat back on, adjusting it with deliberate slowness. I'm completely serious. Now you've got a choice to make. You can let Michael and his mother come inside and watch this picture. Or you can explain to John Ford and the studio brass why their star is leaving. He turned to Michael and Dorothy. And if you do decide to kick us out, I'll make sure every newspaper in Los Angeles knows exactly why John Wayne's premiere was canceled. Wonder how that'll play with your business. It wasn't really a threat. It was a statement of fact, delivered with the calm certainty that made Wayne such a compelling screen presence. He wasn't angry or righteous. He was simply drawing a line that he wouldn't cross. The moment stretched, tension building like the minutes before a shootout in one of Wayne's westerns. Everyone waited to see who would blink first. The manager's surrender. The theater manager's face cycled through several shades of red before settling on resigned pink. He looked at the crowd, at the photographers, at the radio broadcasters who were frantically describing this scene to listeners across America. If he backed down, he looked weak. If he stood firm, he became the villain who denied John Wayne and a disabled veteran access to a movie theater. It wasn't really a choice at all. Very well, he said stiffly. We'll make an exception for this evening. But I want it noted that we're doing this under protest, and any liability issues will. Noted, Wayne interrupted. Now, let's get Michael inside before the picture starts. But Wayne wasn't done. He walked over to the velvet rope barriers and started unhooking them himself, creating a clear path to the theater entrance. His publicist watched in horror as Hollywood's biggest star dismantled the very symbols of exclusive glamour that made premieres special. What are you doing? Harold hissed. Making a road, Wayne replied. These fancy ropes aren't more important than people. He gestured to 2 young ushers who'd been watching the drama unfold. You boys want to help me out? We need to get this wheelchair up those steps. The ushers looked at their manager, who nodded reluctantly. Together with Wayne, they lifted Michael's wheelchair, carefully navigating the theater's front steps while Dorothy followed close behind, her hand over her heart. Inside the theater, the interior of Grauman's Chinese theater was magnificent. Ornate Chinese architecture, elaborate decorations, plush seats arranged in perfect rows. Studio executives and Hollywood elite filled the best seats, their conversations dying away as John Wayne entered not through the VIP entrance, but through the main doors, personally pushing Michael Patterson's wheelchair. John Ford, the legendary director, stood near the front with arms crossed. His eye patch and gruff demeanor made him look like a pirate captain who'd wandered onto a movie set. He watched Wayne navigate the aisle with the wheelchair, and a slow smile spread across his face. That's my Duke, Ford muttered to the producer beside him. Stubborn as a Missouri mule, but his heart's in the right place. Wayne found a spot at the side of the theater where Michael would have a clear view of the screen without blocking anyone. But it was isolated, pushed to the edge like an afterthought. Wayne looked at the prime center seats filled with studio executives, and made another decision. "Excuse me," he said to a group of men in expensive suits sitting in the third row center. "These are my guests, and I'd like them to have good seats." The executives recognized Wayne immediately and started to stand, assuming he was joining them. Instead, Wayne gestured to Michael and Dorothy. "These folks will be sitting here. I'm sure you won't mind moving." It wasn't really a request. The executives, caught between protocol and public relations, gathered their things and moved to less desirable seats, muttering under their breath. Wayne helped position Michael's wheelchair in the aisle seat with a perfect view of the screen, with Dorothy sitting beside her son. The unexpected speech. The house lights dimmed slightly, and a studio executive approached the microphone at the front of the theater. Time for the standard premiere speech. Thank the director, thank the cast, build excitement for the film. But Wayne intercepted him, taking the microphone before the executive could start his prepared remarks. "Ladies and gentlemen," Wayne's voice filled the theater. "Before we start this picture, I want to say something." John Ford raised an eyebrow, wondering where this was going. Studio executives tensed, worried about unscripted comments. But the audience leaned forward with interest. "Hollywood makes movies about heroes," Wayne continued. "Cowboys and soldiers, pioneers and patriots. We create stories about courage and standing up for what's right. But sometimes we forget that real courage doesn't happen on movie screens." He gestured toward Michael. "Tonight, I met a real hero. Michael Patterson here survived something that would have destroyed most men. He's dealing with challenges every single day that would make my movie stunts look easy. And his mother, Dorothy, works 3 jobs to support her son and make sure he still gets to experience joy in life." The audience was silent, hanging on every word. But when they got here tonight, they were told they couldn't come in. That wheelchair wasn't welcome in this fancy theater. That didn't sit right with me. Wayne's jaw set in that familiar stubborn line. "See, I make movies about America, about the values that make this country special. And one of those values is that everyone deserves dignity. Everyone deserves respect. Everyone deserves a chance to sit in a good seat and watch a picture show." He looked directly at Michael. "So I want everyone here to know that Michael Patterson is my personal guest tonight. And any man who's got a problem with that can take it up with me outside after the show." The challenge hung in the air for a moment, and then something unexpected happened. Someone started clapping. Then another person joined in. Within seconds, the entire theater erupted in applause. Studio executives clapped. Actors clapped. Even the grumpy theater manager, standing in the back, offered a reluctant nod of approval. Dorothy Patterson was crying openly now, clutching her son's hand. Michael sat stunned, unable to process that John Wayne, his childhood hero, had just defended him in front of all of Hollywood. The movie experience. As the searchers began to play, Wayne didn't return to the VIP section where he was supposed to sit. Instead, he grabbed a folding chair from the side of the theater and placed it next to Michael's wheelchair. He sat there for the entire film, occasionally leaning over to whisper explanations about scenes or share behind-the-scenes stories. "See that scene where I'm riding through Monument Valley?" Wayne murmured. "We filmed that 17 times because Ford wasn't happy with the lighting. My backside was so sore I could barely walk." Michael laughed, and for the first time in 6 months, the sound wasn't bitter or forced. It was genuine joy. When the film reached its emotional climax, Wayne's character standing in the doorway of the cabin, silhouetted against the desert sky, the theater was dead silent except for the soundtrack. Critics would later call it one of the most powerful moments in cinema history. But for Wayne, the most important thing was the look on Michael's face, transported completely into the story, his disability forgotten in the magic of the movies. After the credits, when the lights came up, the theater erupted in thunderous applause. The Searchers was an instant classic, everyone could feel it. John Ford stood to take his bow, and the cast joined him at the front of the theater. But when Wayne stood, he reached down and took Michael's hand, pulling him into the moment. The applause somehow got louder. People weren't just clapping for the movie anymore. They were clapping for what they'd witnessed before it started, for the reminder that character matters more than credentials, that compassion is more powerful than policy. The studio executive who'd been displaced from his prime seat approached Wayne after the crowd thinned. That was quite a speech, Duke. Unexpected, but it worked. People are going to remember this premiere for a long time. I don't care if they remember it, Wayne replied. I just wanted Michael to feel welcome. But the executive was right. By the next morning, every newspaper in Los Angeles carried the story. Not just movie reviews, but front-page news about John Wayne's defense of a disabled fan. Radio shows discussed it. Television news programs covered it. Within a week, the story had spread across the country. The ripple effect. The impact went far beyond one premiere. Theater owners across California started receiving letters asking if they were accessible to wheelchair users. The question hadn't been asked before, but now it mattered. Some theaters began installing ramps. Others designated spaces for wheelchairs in their auditoriums. Change was slow, but it started. Michael Patterson became something of a celebrity himself. Local newspapers interviewed him, and his story inspired other disabled veterans to speak up about their experiences. He enrolled in community college using the GI Bill and eventually became a vocational counselor, helping other people with disabilities find employment and regain their confidence. But the most profound change was personal. Michael's father, who'd avoided looking at his son since the accident, read the newspaper accounts of that premiere night. He saw how John Wayne, a man he admired, had treated his son with respect and dignity. That night, he came to Michael's room for the first time in months. "I'm sorry," was all he said at first. Then, "I've been a coward. You're the brave one, not me. Can you forgive me?" Dorothy Patterson, who'd worked herself nearly to death trying to support her son alone, finally had help. Michael's father returned to the family, not just physically but emotionally. The Patterson home, which had been filled with silent grief, slowly came back to life. Wayne's continued support. The premiere wasn't the end of Wayne's involvement. He kept in touch with the Patterson family through letters and occasional phone calls. When Michael graduated from community college, Wayne sent a telegram. "Congratulations, partner. Knew you had it in you. Duke." Years later, when Michael opened his counseling practice, Wayne sent a generous check with a note for helping other folks find their courage. The actor never publicized these gestures. They weren't for show or publicity. They were simply what Wayne believed was right. In interviews, when asked about that famous premiere, he always deflected attention away from himself. "I didn't do anything special," he'd say. "I just treated a young man the way anyone should be treated. With respect." The real hero is Michael for not giving up after what happened to him. The broader legacy. That night in 1956 became part of Hollywood lore, referenced in documentaries and books about both John Wayne and the disability rights movement. Some critics noted that Wayne's political views didn't always align with progressive causes, making his actions that night all the more significant. He didn't help Michael because of politics or image, one historian wrote. He helped because it was the right thing to do. That's moral courage in its purest form. The incident influenced other celebrities to speak up about accessibility issues. Within a decade, several major theater chains had voluntarily improved wheelchair access. It would take the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990 to codify these rights into law, but the cultural shift began much earlier, sparked by moments like Wayne's stand at Grauman's Chinese Theater. The final message. John Wayne passed away in 1979, but the story of that premiere night continued to inspire. Michael Patterson, by then a successful counselor and disability advocate, spoke at a memorial service for the actor. "Duke taught me that disability isn't about what you can't do," Michael said, his voice steady and strong. "It's about whether you have the courage to do what you can." He saw me not as a wheelchair or a limitation, but as a person with value. That changed everything. He paused, looking at the photo of Wayne that dominated the memorial. But more than that, he showed everyone that being a hero doesn't require a movie script. It requires being willing to stand up for someone when it's inconvenient, when it goes against the rules, when it might cost you something. Real heroism is about character, not credentials. The lesson from that night in 1956 remains relevant today. How we treat the most vulnerable among us reveals our true character. Policies and procedures matter, but compassion matters more. Everyone deserves dignity, respect, and the chance to participate in life's joys, whether that's watching a movie, attending a school, or simply being seen as fully human. John Wayne noticed a wheelchair at his premiere and chose to act. That choice transformed one life immediately, but its ripples continue to spread, reminding us that a single moment of courage can echo through decades. Final words. The old saying goes, never meet your heroes, they'll only disappoint you. But sometimes, rarely, a hero exceeds even the legend. Michael Patterson met his hero that night in 1956, and John Wayne proved to be everything Michael hoped he would be, and more. Not because he was tough on screen, but because he was kind off screen. Not because he played heroes in movies, but because he acted heroically when it mattered. The wheelchair didn't define Michael Patterson, and the movie roles didn't define John Wayne. Character defined them both. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. We share more inspiring true stories about ordinary moments that reveal extraordinary character. Have you ever witnessed someone standing up for what's right when it wasn't easy? Share your story in the comments below. Your experience might inspire someone else to act with courage and compassion. Sometimes the most important scenes in life happen when the cameras aren't rolling. And sometimes the real John Wayne was even better than the one on screen. The wheelchair at the premiere wasn't a problem to be solved. It was a moment that revealed who John Wayne really was. Not just Hollywood's biggest star, but one of its biggest hearts.